What does a pharmacist do? Well, most people might answer that a pharmacist dispenses the medications that my doctor prescribes. Now, I work with a ton of great pharmacists, and one thing that I don't generally see is excitement about pills in a vial. And this is probably because pharmacists have been trained to do so much more. So what can you get excited about in your community? To find out, let's go beyond the scripts. Hey, welcome back. This is Will Tuft, and you're watching Beyond the Scripts. Now, you may have noticed an overarching theme in previous episodes that we're going to talk a lot about innovation and the ability to change. And you can't really talk about those. I can't believe we've talked about those things for 2 episodes in already and not talked about one of the greatest innovators in American history, and that would have to be Henry Ford. So, of course, we all know the Ford automobiles, but maybe his greater contribution was in the way that he made those. So the moving assembly line changed manufacturing for him, but also for his competitors and for every other industry. So he was able to use that assembly line to manufacture the Model T for over 20 years, and he got to where he could do that fast, accurately, and cheap. And eventually, that wasn't enough. So he had to retool and go back because the competition, even though they had more expensive vehicles, was beginning to outsell him. So he retooled and came out with the Model T. And, you know, it's like my favorite quote from the CPESN camp: filling prescription or in this case, building cars fast, accurately, and cheap just isn't enough anymore. So how do you implement change? Well, a couple years ago, I was at the NCPA conference and I got to see Jim Hewling speak. And he's one of the co-authors on the 4 disciplines of execution. And I won't go into all 4, but the first is focus on wildly important goals. And the part that really resonates, I think, with pharmacists especially, is the urgent versus important balance of every day you go into the pharmacy and you know that it's important that you implement new programs and enhance services. But what's urgent is Miss Smith at the pharmacy counter or the fill queue backing up. So it's a hard balance to keep. So how do you retool that factory without losing the things that made you successful? So today we have a really interesting guest that has that very experience coming from a family pharmacy. And we have Micah Lansford. Did I pronounce that correctly? I've got a habit of mispronouncing everybody's names.
Yeah, you sure did.
So you were at a pharmacy that's been in the community for quite a while. Tell me a little bit about that pharmacy.
So I am the owner and pharmacist in charge at Roden-Smith Pharmacy. This pharmacy has been in the community for almost 75 years and changed hands several times over that time period. My father was the last owner, and I'm the current owner and have been for 2 years now. So we used to have so many pharmacies in Clovis. There were 12, and I think what has happened in a lot of communities is there's been a lot of attrition of these small independent pharmacies that either haven't evolved with the new things, or they didn't have the volume to stay open. So we feel pretty blessed to still be open and thriving.
Yeah, I actually I saw your father and the local newspaper got an award last year. So it's cool to have that kind of that tie to the community and really be part of that. So being in that community for so long, how do you implement change without losing that secret sauce that made you successful, without losing the Ford brand when you came out with that new model?
You know, that's an interesting question because a lot of that thought and that process is a debate I've had with my dad. You know, he's kind of, to me, represents this old school, old fashioned way of doing pharmacy. And I stroll in, having worked in the pharmacy since I was 15, but with a lot of new ideas and new expectations for what it should look like and how we should behave and what we should be spending our time doing. So, I had to, as I was implementing those changes, I had to hear the rebuttal and the old-fashioned desire to keep certain aspects of what community pharmacy has always been and keep them intact. So that's always been a huge priority as we switch to Pioneer and as we've evolved kind of our workflow over the years to make sure we maintain that in the process.
Yeah, so that's kind of the problem that I've seen in a lot of pharmacies is they say our patients don't want a change. They don't want to lose that connection. And I was actually in a pharmacy that had that mindset. And while I was there, somebody came up with the weekly planner pill box from the floor, and I was like, your patients want that. They're doing it themselves. They do want to be adherent to their medications. They do want the best way to take their medications because they know that's what's going to keep them out of the hospital. That's what's going to keep them healthy, but it's a struggle. So, how do you maintain that balance? One thing with MedSync is that a good MedSync program has a lot of communication, like maybe even more meaningful communication than just that every now and then, wave over the counter.
Right. And I think that's how our communication has evolved and adapted, is that we have a lot more of that type of specific communication, that meaningful communication. In transitioning someone from non-sync to sync status, the handoff has to enumerate that. You have to really, in my opinion, explain to the patient that we're gaining time in communication with you whenever we synchronize you. And that's really tough to prove to yourself, I think, when you're starting synchronization. Am I gaining more time? And you really aren't up front. Those first handful of patients, a lot of times you're thinking this is just a lot more work. But you have to see the value in it. You have to be able to commit to it. And you have to give it that time to really see, what, this is where it's heading. This is where we need to be. And there really is value for the patient here.
Yeah. And there's a percentage where the scale tips, where initially, if you have a handful of patients, it is more work. It's a new process. But once you have that economy of scale where you have the same process, it's not new anymore, it's when you really start to open things up. So during those first steps, when your team is kind of looking at you like, man, this new guy coming in here with his MedSync and his rock music, is he, this looks like more work for me. Like, how do you get your team on board with a process that, can seem, on the surface, if you're reluctant, it can seem like you're doing this in more of a like closed shop kind of way that's less personal. So how did you kind of counter that with your team?
Well, the first thing is I had to sell out to it myself. I couldn't be fickle on how I felt about it. And so me and another new pharmacist, we kind of took it on that we're going to figure this out. We're going to take a sample of patients and do it for a few months with them and just kind of follow the process, see what, nuances to it weren't readily visible that we needed to kind of come up with answers for, and have those questions addressed before we just jumped head in and dealt with them as a whole company or a whole pharmacy. So, getting that first couple months and figuring it out myself with this other pharmacist, it allowed me to have the buy-in for myself, to be able to then take those case studies to other staff, other pharmacists, and say, this is where this patient was. This is how many times they came in throughout the month. This is how many phone conversations we had with them. This is how confusing their profile was before. And this is where they are now. And isn't this easier now that we manage them this way, not only for us, but really more so for the patient? They only have that one trip in here to pick up 10 medications a month. And I could go on with the benefits of it for probably too long, but I think establishing that vetting process for myself first was most important. Then it allowed me to take it and scale it and go, what is it going to take to get buy-in from the rest of the staff? And how do I implement that? And how do we measure that? And measuring it has been, I would say, key to the growth in our MedSync program throughout the last few years.
Yeah, and for anybody that hasn't read the 4 disciplines of execution, you just touched on a couple of the others. So when you started, did you begin with like your most difficult patient, or did you start with like somebody you know? Like what was kind of your warm-up approach?
I don't think we started with the most difficult patient. I think we started with some low-hanging fruit. You know, this person's compliant. They're on 5 or 6 medications. They just come in once a week to pick up them, and they wait until it runs out. You know, those people that you have a little bit better relationship with. And just like we've done over the last year with strip dose packaging, you know, you got to figure out how that fits into your workflow all the same. And you got to really start that with patients that you trust, that trust you, that give you a little bit more grace, because you're going to need it as you're figuring out a new system. So absolutely, you know, we handpick those first batch of patients to go, we're trying out a new thing, we're figuring it out, but it's going to be better in the long run.
Yeah, so one of the things I think is really cool about your pharmacy is how you've started to educate your patients on the sync model. So instead of seeming like an upsell, would you like to join this service or something like that? You kind of present it to them like with the trifold, like, hey, this is kind of our concierge service. You know, it really makes it seem like, oh, this is something special.
Right. Well, I learned from a couple different situations that presenting it as an upsell was not going to work for mass synchronization purposes. I think I was at the Pioneer conference a few years ago, and I heard Joe Moose say that it didn't work, and he ended up transitioning and just automatically enrolling all of his patients. And I thought, well, you know, we have our volume's a little bit too big to do that, and it felt like we wouldn't be able to accomplish it that way. And I didn't have the chance. You know, you really need to explain it to a lot of people and how it works and why you're doing it. So I couldn't take that drastic of an approach. But what we did do was we changed our language and how we spoke about it. We quit saying, you know, would you like to sign up for synchronization? It's a really good thing, because the majority of people's default answer is, oh no, I don't want to sign up for anything.
Right. If you try to upsell me on anything at point of sale, no, I'll pass.
Right. And you know, I like podcasts a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I listened to this book from a guy that was mentioned or referenced in the podcast. His name is Richard Thaler, and he won a Nobel Prize for behavioral economics. Wrote a book called Nudge, and the whole premise of it is kind of around this upsell thing. And one of the points that the book lays out is, if you make the default what you want them on and allow for people to opt out, then you're going to have more buy-in. And so I've really bought into this behavioral economics philosophy of doing pharmacy. So now we see patients that need to be set up that haven't been set up yet, or are new patients, and we tell them, you know, we are a pharmacy that prioritizes patients, and And we do that by synchronizing our patients to make sure that we're going to do everything right on time when it's supposed to be done, and just be a few steps ahead of you and the doctor. And so we already have that set up here, and this is how it works. Now, if we have patients that go, oh, I can't do that, then it's a different conversation. It's why they can't, as opposed to why they shouldn't. And
Right.
Whenever we flipped our philosophy on how we were talking to patients on that, most people they're okay with it. They go, I can get them all on the same day, and yeah, sure, that's no problem.
Right.
So that was a big change, big deal for sure.
One of the misconceptions, I think, about a MedSync program is that it is going to be less personal and it's just centered around, having all the medications ready on that day. But there's a lot more that goes into that process. So that communication element, I think, is crucial. So how far out do you do those MedSync calls? Tell me a little bit about the communication process.
So we make the sync call 7 days before the run out date. In Pioneer, it has the sync date listed there as like the pivot date, and it is the sync date, but it's also the date that they truly run out of medications, or they're supposed to run out of medications. And so we make that call a week in advance, or send them a text message, whatever they prefer. And really, it's just enough time to allow for all the work that needs to be done in between. And we follow the guidelines or the schedule for processing, printing, filling, and checking that Pioneer had posted, at least as of a few years ago. I don't know if it's changed much, but we do it such that it allows, a few day buffer time so they can pick it up before they run out, of course, 3 or 4 days.
That's pretty cool. So have you seen with that new model, as you get a bigger percentage and you do have a little bit more predictable workflow, how has that affected just the cadence of the pharmacy on the day-to-day?
Well, there was a tipping point. I would say our tipping point really was probably 2.5 years ago, whenever we split it. We split the fill and the check day on different days. And I think the default kind of recommendation in Pioneer is that you process and you order, and then you fill, you print, fill, and check on the same day. And we split it on different days. And the reason we do that is we would just have so many waiting for check, and we wanted it to be like this new separate process that kind of had its own space, that nothing got left behind. And whenever we didn't have enough room on the counter to keep all these totes that were waiting for check the next day, I had to modify and add a counter in the back of the pharmacy, just for filling sync prescriptions. So as of today, I have a sync technician that's a part-time technician that comes in at 7 o'clock in the morning and fills all the medications and orders the ones that will be checked the next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. And so we have special sync totes, and we have a sync wall that's, the common Uniweb pharmacy fixtures, and we fill up a whole wall of prescriptions. They're waiting for check for the next morning. And whenever we got to the point where we needed that space, that was whenever things fell over and we hit that tipping point, because all the staff started to ask the question, well, why isn't this patient synchronized? And it's a lot easier for us now if the patient is synchronized, and we prefer it to go through that process over there, because it does just account for so many variables and keep us ahead of the patient's needs.
Yeah, if somebody's written a maintenance medication, why are we surprised when 30 days later they want to swing by in 10 minutes on their way home from work and pick it up, right? To have that predictable workflow. Part of that is, that's part of the challenge with MedSync is that it is so flexible. Sometimes when there's too many options, it can be a little difficult to, know how that needs to be configured. So as you were working through that process, did you reach out to like your support person, or did you just figure it all out on your own? Like what was kind of your methodology there?
I had so many very helpful phone calls with my account rep, my software account rep at Pioneer. Kendra, she no longer works at Pioneer. She moved on into the medical field herself, but she was such a huge asset because as we would hit roadblocks and not really understand how to manage or how to adapt our workflow with the defaults in Pioneer, she helped me understand it, and then it was up to us to figure out how we wanted to set our workflow on our side to account for those things.
When you start to talk about an entire wall full of sync, right? That's like, okay, this pharmacy is doing an awful lot of sync. How many patients, what percentage of patients would you guess you have on a sync program now?
I think as of this week, probably, it's something I used to look at probably every day because it was just changing all the time. And I think as of today, we have right under 4,000 sync patients.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. And, but it sounds like a lot of work, but it's less work now that they're synchronized patients.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you start doing the math, if you start putting a pen to paper on touch points of a patient calling the pharmacy to request a medication, you calling them to let them know it's ready, them coming to the pharmacy and spending 15 minutes at the counter, your check station, your fill station, your data entry. And even if those are extremely efficient, if you're doing all of those things separately 4 or 5 times a month, all of a sudden you have 20, 30 touch points with one patient. And it's a huge time spent. I can't imagine doing a really, really high volume without a sync program.
Oh, I can't now. I used to, our weeks look so much different now than they used to. We used to have Monday as most pharmacies being our busiest day. Patients realized that they were about to run out or ran out of their medications over the weekend, and they call on Monday morning first thing, and that historically had always been our busiest day. And now our busiest day is Tuesdays and Wednesdays, which I don't know what business doesn't want their busiest days to be in the middle of the work week. But I mean, what that has done for our flexibility within the pharmacy, allowing people to, take time off. Everybody wants to take time off over the weekend on a Friday and a Monday and kind of take advantage of that built-in time off. And historically, it was tough. We didn't want employees or our own selves to be gone on Monday. You can't be gone on a Monday.
Oh yeah.
That was what my dad told me growing. We got to be back before Monday morning because it's, we're going to hit the ground running. And anymore, that would be the preferred day to be out of town is Thursday, Friday, the weekend, and Monday.
Oh, nice.
It's worked really well for that purpose.
So when you're working towards that sync model, you have your patients that you're talking to through the week. We see all of these different things at the trade shows that we should start doing in the pharmacy, offering consultations and fitting for diabetic accessories and shoes and so forth, and DME products or immunizations. There's so many different things, and it's like if somebody's coming into the pharmacy to just pick up a medication, it's hard to say, hey, do you want to spend 30 minutes trying on some shoes, right? Same thing with, any of those enhanced services. So have you seen like that appointment-based model kind of come into play when you're making that sync call to kind of build out those other opportunities as well?
We have a little bit. We don't do any billable DME or things like that. We have a robust immunization program, and we are, as compliant and up to date with our MTMs, CMRs, tips, all those things that we can be. But I think what it's allowed us to do is just figure out how we want to spend that time and have the opportunity to make those assessments for ourselves. Do we want to add in a service like that? Because now we have time. We have scheduled, purposeful conversations with the patient, whereas before we'd be, calling them to do an MTM, and they're like, why are you calling me? I call you, kind of thing. And now they get a call from us, and we try to tie that in with the sync call if it's necessary, to say, oh, by the way, your insurance has prompted us to talk to you about your medications a little further, doing a CMR. And so it becomes a lot more natural of a conversation. They start to kind of expect that, my pharmacists they're gonna ask me more questions than they used to, because they're doing things better or more than they did before.
Sure.
So, and what it's provided me as the pharmacist in charge, as far as time to look at our systems, really. I'm a big systems person. I just love that about Pioneer, because it's just riddled with great systems. It's allowed me to look at things that have gone under the radar, that need to get attention, that we never had time for before. So, I just this week rolled out an updated controlled substance dispensing policy that, needed to be refined, needed to be clarified. And, before, years ago, it would have felt like we never had time to make sure that everything else we're doing was being done correctly and communicated to the staff, so they know what to do. Anytime we can create a system like synchronization, where you have to come ask your manager, ask the pharmacist a question, what should I do here, or how do I do this, or is this okay? I believe that's really important for the pharmacist in charge or owner to create as many clear systems so that you don't have to be asked questions. That's how we're going to free time to do DME, shoe fittings, or whatever it is at anyone's pharmacy. I think Sync is the foundation to providing that time. And I don't think anybody will ever think of pharmacies other than a place to fill their medications. And I think because of that, a foundation of what we do has to be filling prescriptions and doing it in the most efficient and thoughtful way possible.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like there's a crunch on like medical care across country anyway. So, I mean, being able to get as much value from the most accessible members of healthcare just kind of makes sense for the patient. And I got to think, if you are a pharmacist, if you're filling this, one patient's prescriptions 5 or 6 times a month, there's got to be some level of wording fatigue, where you see these alerts coming up in PioneerRx, you see these, various things popping up. And it seems like if you're dealing with that patient 5 or 6 times, maybe you're not going to dig in as deep every time. Whereas if you have this one, like, organized process for this patient, you kind of take a bigger view of that patient's complete care.
Yeah. And I think that's why we kind of adapted our sync program, where it's checked the day after it's filled. We have 3 full-time pharmacists on staff and 2 part-time. And, historically we needed 3 or 4 pharmacists all day long, because there was a volume of checking that justified it. But checking prescriptions in front of patients all day long to me, doesn't bode well for what we do in our profession. What they see is they're just back there checking prescriptions. They don't have time to talk to us, or they don't have time to give recommendations. And so when I realized that we could push that to earlier in the day before we opened the doors, we jumped on it. We had always sent in one person early to, do anything that had already been queued up or set to future fill in the day. But whenever we realized, we could send in 2 pharmacists at 7:00 in the morning and check all of our pre-filled sync patients, then now we have the time to not only look at it before we fill it, but look at it when we're checking it, to look at the whole picture, not be distracted by questions from other staff, phone calls or anything, patients out front. The lights are off out front, and each day we have at least 2. This morning, Wednesday morning, we had 3 pharmacists checking prescriptions from 7 until 9:00, and or I'm sorry, yesterday morning, 3 pharmacists from 7 to 9:00, and I think we checked about, most Wednesday mornings we check about 700 prescriptions before we open the doors.
I feel like there's a lot of pharmacists right now listening, like, that sounds incredibly peaceful and nice.
It is, and I really value my dad's feedback on it, because he's the era of pharmacists where, man, he's an efficient checker. Like that was just kind of what his generation of pharmacists, retail pharmacists, you better be good at checking and checking fast. And so in my kind of transition to owning the pharmacy and to allowing him to pseudo retire, part of it was how can we best utilize the different ages of pharmacists we have on staff, because me and our newer pharmacists, we're interested in the clinical aspect of it and managing sync patients. And then my dad, our older pharmacist, that's a tougher hill to climb for him, figuring out how to manage a sync patient, how to do MTMs and that kind of thing. And they still have a lot of value and time left in their career, but they don't necessarily want to spend it in that way. Yeah. And so, it's a great mutually beneficial kind of situation. He comes in 3 of the 5 mornings a week, works from 7 to 9, doing what he's really good at, checking prescriptions. And he loves and tells me how enjoyable it is that he comes in and does something that he's done forever and is good at, but it's easier to look at the whole patient, because we'll check up 10 prescriptions for a patient, and then we're looking at their profile and making those assessments. Is everything here? Is everything for the right quantity? Are there any interactions that need to be addressed when the patient comes and picks it up? Because we're looking at everything right now. And, and then he's out of here most days before we open, to enjoy life a little bit more.
Go hit the golf course, huh?
That's right. Yeah.
I've noticed on your website, you advertise that you have compounding services. Return to stocks are never fun in a pharmacy setting, but if somebody doesn't want to compound that cycle, that's a real hassle. So having that sync program, that seems like it would really help with that personalized medication aspect. Has that made it easier to get your compounds into the patient's hands, or is that something that seems kind of unrelated?
No, it is related, because, historically, I think our IVR recording would say if you're calling in a refill for a compound, allow up to 72 hours. And that's always frustrating, that relationship with the patient where they go, but I'm out now. And you go, but I can't get somebody back there, or I don't have it queued, or there's so many ahead of you, I can't get it today. And with us compounding, we're able to see what's been queued and go, well, I'm going to grab that out of the queue and go ahead and start working on that, so it's ready on the same day with the other medications. And so we very rarely run into a situation, even with compounding anymore, where somebody says, I need this refill today. I can't wait until it's supposed to be ready with the rest of my medications. Those outliers always occur, but now we have so much extra time that we can accommodate them better and make sure they're set up to be synchronized the next time. My big thing is avoiding the same problem multiple times. You have that patient that they always wait until the last day to call in their, whatever on Friday afternoon when you're not going to get an order till Monday. And so, kind of what I preach to my staff is, let's not set ourselves up to have to fix the same problem over and over again. Let's try to find a long-term solution to problems that won't represent themselves. And most of the time that is, let's synchronize the patient.
So you have other services in your pharmacy that I can't imagine trying to offer without a sync program. And again, it's, the more you add on those enhanced services, the more and more you see the value, not just in workflow, and the possibility to offer so many other services. But your strip packaging. So before we talk about that, and maybe I don't know if I'm going to want the answer, but does your device have a name? Does your robot have a name?
I would say it's a she. I know that much, but I don't think she has a name yet. Our Parada that we've had for, I think, 10 years now is Gabby, but our Rapid Pack does not have a name yet.
Okay. Okay. So with the you do strip packaging or
strip dose packaging? Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So I can't imagine trying to do that without a sync program. That would be, impossible.
Yeah, it really would be.
Yeah. So are you doing that for all of your patients, retail patients, or only for facility patients? How do you offer that to your patients?
So we do that for any patient that wants to sign up with it. Haven't been able to get the facilities. They don't see how that works with their systems already in place here. So we do single dose packaging for them still. But yeah, patients that want to do that, we saw it as a service that, you see everybody else that's providing it, and we just thought we have to have a presence here. We can't just turn our head away from this looming thing that everybody is going to want, or really a lot of people need. I still haven't advertised it in a big way, and keep telling myself I need to do that now, because we're ready for taking on a lot more strip dose packaging patients. But it was a process like sync, where we had to figure out what are the problems going to be, and how do we manage them whenever they come up. And I will say there's an equal amount of problems that can come up with strip dose packaging that can come up with medication synchronization. Whenever you up front, I think there were several patients we'd spend more than an hour in the pharmacy, and we have this time because we're synchronizing, right? So one of the pharmacists would step aside and explain to them multi-dose packaging and go through that process of setting them up. And people want to utilize all the medication they have on hand. And that is something that PillPack and these mail order multi-dose strip dose packaging pharmacies, they don't even entertain the idea of it. But at the local pharmacy, they want to be able to bring in all the bottles they've gotten from you and utilize them. And so figuring out if we can do that and how to accommodate that, and how to go back and admit them into the facility, take their medication or not, and utilize it. That was a huge thing that we had to decide, are we going to do that or not? And what is our answer if it's no? And most of the time, we don't do that, because it is an incredible amount of work that cannot be recouped from anywhere.
Yeah.
And you'll just spend an hour or two trying to, I got this bottle of whatever that I have 300 pills in because I got a prescription from the mail order twice that I didn't want, and I want to use all of them.
Right.
And so figuring out what your answer is to those was huge. And then another disappointing thing was doing this work and packaging them and then them never picking them up, or picking them up 2 weeks late and the date is off on the packaging now because it's dated specifically for the sync date. The first date is the sync date for their sync day supply 28 or 30. And if they don't, then, they're concerned, well, I had enough, or I forgot to take doses, and, managing that and figuring out really what you're going to do. What we learned, or what we decided as a pharmacy, is the patients that didn't do well with multi-dose packaging, were those patients that could be eliminated by charging a small fee to have it packaged. And, I think this is true for everybody. Whenever you pay for something, you value it more. That's always the case. And so we offered it free to a sample group of patients for a year, and added on some here and there. And we decided, we're gonna charge $9 a month to do the packaging. It's gonna come, we talked about everything it included as opposed to the price. But $9 was enough after talking to that sample group of patients. And they saw it being worth it to still have their local pharmacy, somebody that they could come put eyes on and ask questions, or wait until the last minute to package it because of a change that they were expecting. They saw that $9 was appropriate for the value that it provided. And the people that kind of abused the situation, wouldn't pick it up, or were kind of problematic, they kind of there was some self-attrition there where they went, I'll go back to bottles. And it's really better for them in a lot of ways that they stay on it, because there's no amount of counseling or intervention that I can provide to get them to actually take their medication every day.
Yeah, it's funny how you can give something away, or put a little bit of a fee on it, and all of a sudden the perceived value of the exact same product really can change.
Absolutely, yeah.
So before we run out of time, one of the things that I think is really cool, I saw your Facebook page, and you guys have a great Facebook page, by the way.
Oh, that's all due to my wife. She's great with managing our social media, and she does a heck of a job with it.
Yeah, she must be busy then, because she's right next door, and and she's probably going to be mad at you for holding your coffee cup the wrong way, so you're not showing the logo.
I'll have to flip it around.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, because I was trying to order one of those, and I was like, oh no, it won't be here by the time we interview.
Oh, that's too bad.
One of the things I saw on your Facebook page was the mobile vaccinations, and so that's super cool every year. This year, even more exciting than ever, with everything's in the news about COVID vaccinations, and who knows what 2021 is going to look like with vaccinations. But tell me just a little bit about how you've kind of launched that, and how you found success with that in the community.
Well, I think I prefer to go to businesses or businesses that we collaborate with, and allow people to see who they speak to on the phone as often as we can. And whenever we can do mobile clinics at local facilities, or within clinics, or at businesses, then it really, I think, benefits the patients a lot. And it just allows them to see that, hey, this pharmacy's, they're really going to meet us where we're at, literally and figuratively, with regard to their health care. And, a lot of people that wouldn't have ever considered going to an independent pharmacy, but then has a pharmacist come into their business and say, oh yeah, I'm the pharmacist at Roden-Smith, or the local community pharmacy. And it's such good advertisement for your business. And I think we've gotten a lot of patients to transfer over because of those local mobile clinics that we do. And they're pretty easy to do. It's one of the most efficient ways to give a bunch of flu shots.
Oh, absolutely.
Or any vaccine. We did one for the local school system, and they held it at their central office, and we had done it indoors for years past. But with all the COVID restrictions, especially in New Mexico, they were talking about canceling it, and we said let's do it outdoors. We can set up things where people can drive through and stay in their cars, and we'll go out to their car and do it. And we wouldn't have the time to do that without synchronization. I can promise you that. But we were able to push some things around with sync where we were doing some work a little early, and had 2 pharmacists there throughout the whole day, switch shifts at around lunchtime, and the 2 other pharmacists finished out the rest of the day. And I think we administered, I want to say 400 flu shots in that day. And, we're always refining that system to check all the boxes that we have to check and be efficient, and still provide what patients need. And the mobile clinics is just one facet of that. And, we have a great walk-in immunization capacity here at the store, but we do enjoy going out to the clinics, doing the mobile clinics themselves.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously the fee for doing the immunizations is great. The advertising is great, but that's so much more than advertising. That's 400, organic connections to people in your community that it's hard to put a value on that, because you're literally putting your hands on somebody in the community and keeping them well. So, I mean, that's a pretty great thing. And anytime you can impact that many people and spread the good word about what you're doing over at Roden-Smith, absolutely. Yeah. And make sure you're holding your coffee cup while you do it.
Yeah. I'll have to find a way to incorporate that a little better.
All right. Well, it looks like we are about out of time. I know you've got plenty to do there at the pharmacy. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, and look forward to see what you guys are doing in 2021.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Will.
All right. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Scripts, presented by the Catalyst Pharmacy Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please support our channel by liking, subscribing, and clicking the notification bell so that you'll be notified anytime we post new content. To stay up to date with all of the latest independent pharmacy news and content, follow PioneerRx on your preferred social media platform.